usually welcomes people. This is an Omni-sponsored event, but Gladys had another meeting tonight, so I'm filling in for her. I'd like to thank you all for coming, and we will have two speakers tonight. Our first speaker is Neil Selden with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance out of Washington, D.C. And Neil was a founding member of the National Recycling Coalition and the Grassroots Recycling Network. He is also the co-founder of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Neil knows how to help communities find sustainable solutions to solid waste and economic problems. He writes regularly for trade journals, providing insight and criticism of poorly designed technologies and programs. So Neil, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Louie, and thank you, Will, for being the technician and making this possible. At Louie's suggestion, I have looked at the report from the consultant group, I think it's Kessler Associates. I've actually read through the report twice. I've not had time to go through the appendices, so I may be incomplete in some of this analysis, and of course I'll continue to network with you and explore the good and the ugly of whatever we're facing. So let me take a few minutes. Let me just say this. Louis' introduction, I would like to supplement that with 60 seconds. That is, my role for the last 40 years has been to help cities recycle more materials, recover more materials, but also to add value to those materials locally to maximize the environmental and economic benefits, namely new jobs, new manufacturing, etc. And we have been, over the years, we've been responsible for turning cities away from incineration toward comprehensive recycling. Some people call that zero waste. We've worked in LA, Austin, Gainesville, Washington, D.C., and a host of other cities and counties across the country. So, having said that, Louis asked me to look at the situation in Fayetteville. My immediate reaction was that going to single stream from the current collection system onboard sorting would be a mistake. It would be a mistake for a number of reasons, which I'll go through right now. One is that the city loses a good deal of control over the system if it employs a single stream system wherein the recyclables have to be shipped out of town for processing. Immediately you lose about 20 or 30 jobs. You also have it will cost more to recycle since you have to ship materials 15 or so miles out of town. But what you're facing is the centralization of capital in the recycling field. We think this is a bad thing. We think the recyclables should stay in the city to allow for any number of opportunities for companies to use the material to add value, as I stated earlier. Just to give you one simple example, if you have a brand new iPhone that someone's not anymore, and if you add a new one in 2015 and you're looking to buy a new one, you could recycle that, meaning give it to an old e-scrap company, they'll shred it, and it's worth about $1. But if you have a program in your city that trains young people to deconstruct that phone or computer, whatever it is, you're looking at about $200 worth of wealth, which includes working parts and very valuable alloys that would be lost to you and to the people in your city that need to bridge the digital divide. Repairing computers is the best way to motivate young people to get the skills and to motivate them toward entrepreneurship, etc. So I think you should keep your processing in town, and I think you should keep your materials as clean as you can, as apparently you do. And that's done a number of things. It's attracted Ripple Glass, which is doing a good program for you. It's also excellent for educating people into the real reasons for recycling. And it also helps understand non-traditional recycling materials, organics, which I'll get into in a moment. Let me describe what happened in Washington, D.C., where I live now. I'm originally from New York, as I'm sure you can tell from my accent. About 10 years ago, we had a wonderful dual stream system. People separated their paper in one bin and their glass bottle, glass and plastic, metal, etc., in the other. And it was picked up and it was hauled to a local company that employed about 25 people. It happened to be a minority company right here in the district. Waste Management Inc. came in and convinced the city to go to single stream. And now, as a result of that, that company, the local company, went out of business, of course. They lost the contract. And right now, the city has to send 24,000 tons of recyclables a year to Elk Ridge, Maryland, which is 35 miles north. I calculated that's about just under $1 million of transportation that's completely unnecessary. Further, the processing at this gigantic Waste Management Inc. facility in Elk Ridge is a regional facility. They're processing 22,000 tons per month, which is gigantic. And what it means is, and we can confirm a number of other anecdotes I can tell you, Waste Management Inc. is interested in throughput. Therefore, they run their machines at overrated capacity. The materials get contaminated, mostly by glass, but other materials as well, organics, and they're very of low value. In fact, at the Elk Ridge facility, the glass that is recovered is so contaminated it cannot be sold as glass. And Waste Management Inc. uses it as a daily landfill cover. And imagine this. You folks, or we folks here in DC, our glass, which is 1/3 the weight of most recyclables, and we pay to get it shipped up there, and then it's not recycled, but they use it as a raw material, a landfill cover. So DC is paying for, let's say, 10% of the waste stream, the recycle stream, to go and be a free raw material for Waste Management Inc., for which the city gets no rebate or no compensation whatsoever. So this is to make the point that it's important to keep local control. You can have, well, you do have an excellent on-board sort system, which means your processing system is very, very simple, and it means your market, your access to markets is much greater than any materials coming out of a single stream system. We just recently came back from California, where the solid waste manager from Sunnyvale pointed out that during these last few years, when the prices of recyclables have gone down because of energy and other issues, their materials were getting top prices throughout this last 2 or 3 year period, mainly because they had very clean materials. And prices are now coming up. In the last 6 months, they've come up by around 10%, and there are projections that the prices are going to be better. So I would urge you to avoid centralization, continue the system you're using. Let me now just switch for a few minutes to organics. The report from Kessler I disagree with their suggestion to go to single stream, but I do agree with some of the things in their report, and I'll mention two. One is the focus on organics. Organics is about 30, it could be 40% of your waste stream if you include soiled papers, that is your pizza boxes that have grease on them, your wrappers around the greasy hamburger, etc. like that. That, of course, organics have nothing to do with single stream, but my point is that if you want to increase your recycling rate, focus on organics as hanging fruit, particularly in the commercial sector, but also in the household sectors. There are now 200 cities that collect organics from households, and they're basically addressing 30% of their waste stream, which would be, in your case, and most of these cases, a big jump in your recycling rate. On the issue of recycling rate, you have a pretty low recycling rate now. It's about 18 to 20%. The national average is 35%, but you all know, I'm sure, that there are some cities that have double the national average. San Francisco, Los Angeles, Mass, Alachua County, Florida, King County, Washington, etc. And one of the inconsistencies in the report that I saw, the inconsistency was this. When the report went through each material, what they anticipate from a single stream, the anticipated increase in recycling from a single stream system, the estimates were basically doubling the current recycling rate by material. But in their concluding summary sections, they indicate that single stream will only bring your recycling rate from 18% to 23%, which is a very small jump given the investment that they're asking you to make and given the fact that they're asking you to give up local control. I point out also that they estimate that there would be a 5% increase in your recycling rate just from banning certain materials from disposal. That's very telling to me because it's asking you to make a major transformation in your habits and collection systems, etc., your employment systems, for a small gain in increased recycling. Whereas if you focus on banning materials from the disposal stream, the waste stream, plus composting, I believe you could double your recycling rate within 1 year. The final thing I would say at this point, and then I'd be happy to answer questions if I can, is that the section that the report had on education and public awareness, I thought was excellent. Briefly, well, I'll just summarize it. It presents multi-messaging and reinforcement that's needed to fully develop a recycling culture in the city. And I'll conclude by pointing out some of the information coming out of North and South Carolina, where they, recycling campaigns, one of their key slogans is recycle for jobs. And I would urge you to increase your recycling through some of the methods that are suggested. One other suggestion is, I think your pay-as-you-throw system, we love pay-as-you-throw, we think it's the way to go, but the differentials between the large, medium, small-sized cans, I think is just too small to motivate people. And there's an interesting history here. Pay-as-you-throw was first initiated in Fresno, California in the early 80s, I guess, and it didn't work. It didn't work because the differential between recycling and non-recycling was $5 a month. And at $5 a month, it did not impact people's thinking and spending. The next iteration of pay-as-you-throw came in Seattle 5 or 6 years later, where there was a very significant difference. It was about $12 to $17 difference between the different sizes. And let's say it's 12 times 10 months is $120 a year. And that got people to pay attention to their garbage meter, if you will. And the pay-as-you-throw system in Seattle and many other cities is working very well. So I would look to adjusting the differentials to stimulate more recycling. I would say this, I'm not an environmentalist, although of course I'm sensitive to environmental issues, and recycling is terrific for the environment. Composting is one of the things that can actually reverse climate change, the deleterious effects of climate change. And I would urge people to get copies of the Freeman County, California Compost Project, which has demonstrated that if you use compost on grasslands, you can actually reverse climate change to a great extent. Having said all of that, I would urge you to keep local control and have an active program for recruiting companies to come in and use your very clean recycled materials, clean and processed recycled materials. I think you're on the right track. I think there are good suggestions in this report, but I think before you think of redoing your system, your total system into single stream, you should try some of these other things which are less costly, such as a larger differential, focusing on organics, and beefing up your education and public awareness through the multi-messaging that Kessler report indicates.
Has anybody,
Having said that, I would be happy to answer questions if I can.
does anybody have any questions for Neil at this time? We can contact him by email later if we don't. I know.
Sure.
Neil, thanks a million. Everybody was writing furiously.
Well, please give them my email address and phone number. Anyone who is referred to you has special status with me.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you so much. We're going to try to keep you on so you can hear Susan.
Oh, that would be very good. And I want to thank Will for his technical assistance.
Absolutely. All right, let's see.
That was Neil Seldman from the Institute of Local Self-Reliance in Washington, D.C. Our second speaker tonight is Susan Collins with the Container Recycling Institute. She's out in California. Susan leads the Container Recycling Institute in research projects, and she works with environmental organizations, businesses, state and federal governments throughout the United States and the world to educate the public on the benefits of packaging recyclables, or, well, making packaging more recyclable. Prior to 2009, Susan was a consultant for 20 years and assisted over 80 public agencies with their solid waste and recycling programs. She holds degrees in manufacturing and engineering from Boston University, and she has an MBA from UCLA. You've probably heard Susan interviewed on NPR, or maybe you've read one of her quotes in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. And this is Susan Collins. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Louise. Hello.
We're glad you're here. Let's see if Will can get your slideshow going.
Great. You tell me when it's up and I'll start.
All right, we are on the first slide.
Good, good. And you can hear me well, is that true?
Yes, we can hear you pretty well.
Terrific. If I need to speak up, you just let me know.
All right, you just give me a heads up when you change slides.
Okay, we'll start with the first one. This slide just shows our mission statement. That our mission statement is we are striving to North America a global model for the collection and quality recycling of packaging materials. The word quality in our mission statement is very, very important. We know that it's terribly important to have high quality recyclables collected so that they can be used to replace virgin materials in the manufacture of new products, and I'll explain that in a minute. So we'll move on to slide number 2. A little bit about CRI, just for background. We're a nonprofit, and I've already stated our mission. What we do in order to achieve the mission is create and maintain a database on containers and packaging. We study container and packaging reuse and recycling options and their environmental and economic impacts, and we educate. We do things like this very webinar right now, and I speak at conferences and we produce reports so that we can take our good research and share it with as many people as possible. And we also create national networks to discuss these issues and work on improvements together. So the third slide, this is what I call recycling nirvana. How can we collect the most materials at the highest quality levels so that they can be made into products again at the lowest cost? Once you've achieved those 3 things, then everybody's happy, and that's why I call it recycling nirvana. Next, why is recycling important? That's slide 4, and I'm going to move into 5. For the longest time, we've talked about recycling being important as a way to divert materials from landfills, but it turns out that it's far more important than that. What's really happening when we achieve high quality recycling is that we are replacing virgin materials in the manufacturing process. And when we do that, we avoid the extraction, transport, and processing of virgin materials, and that results in lower energy usage, lower production of greenhouse gases and other emissions, and lower production of toxics. And those are the things we're looking to do when we recycle. So we often talk about recycling in terms of weight, in terms of tons reduced, but tons are not an indication of environmental footprint. It's these other things that we're really looking for, these other environmental benefits. Slide 6. This is meant to show us how sometimes people ask me, aren't we, getting ahead of this? Aren't we reducing what we use? And a lot of people think that we're reducing our use of plastic water bottles by people carrying around their own bottles instead. But unfortunately, the real sales statistic tell a different story. We are continuing to experience rampant consumerism. We're continuing to purchase more and more things. And the issue of bottled water is one where it is a product that back in 1996, it was a product that hardly existed. When you talked about beverages, it was a very, very small category of the beverages sold. So this chart shows that in 1996, we purchased 2.8 billion bottles of water. And I know billion is something that's hard for us to wrap our minds around at all, and that's billion with a B. And it's hard to imagine a billion of anything. But back then, in 1996, it was mostly Perrier and Evian bottles. But now bottled water has become ubiquitous, and in 2014, we actually consumed 59 billion bottles of water. So in that 20-year period, we experienced like a 24-fold increase in the consumption of this product. So moving on to the next slide. This is a little bit of a comparison of how different countries are doing when it comes to recycling glass, and it shows the progress that's been achieved in other countries, but really has not been achieved in the US. We find that throughout Europe, by the implementation of best practices and new recycling policies and their packaging directive, countries in the EU have experienced anything from a 1% increase in glass recycling, which is very much on the small side, to all the way to a 39% increase or in the UK, or 44% increase in Ireland. So they've been doing great things by implementing new recycling programs. And unfortunately, you'll see at the very bottom of that chart in the US, our glass recycling rate didn't change at all in this 15-year period. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about single-stream recycling. Our research in single-stream recycling started in 2009. That was when we released the report. So this is a picture of the cover of the report on slide 8. It's called Understanding Economic and Environmental Impacts of Single-Stream Collection Systems. And so next I'm going to show you some of the findings of that report. We've continued to do additional research since that report. So here on slide 9, this is the major finding. In the average single-stream collection program, if you collect 100 tons of recyclables at the curb, on average, 75 tons will actually be recycled into new products, and most of the rest will be landfilled.
Susan?
So that means, yes.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I want to explain something here. What your picture shows is an 18-gallon bin, and that's what we use right now for our curb sort program. People in Fayetteville, when we think of single stream here, we think of a roll-out cart. And I'm not correcting your slide, I just want to be sure people in Fayetteville realize that what you're showing would be dumped into a single compartment truck. That single stream is about a single compartment truck. We could put wheels on that curb sort container and wheel it out to the curb and still do curb sort. So thank you for letting me interject that.
That's terrific, and you are so right. The definition of this is really important. Yeah, it does mean mixing all the materials together. And similarly, people think that if you have a rolling cart, that necessarily means that you have single stream. But there are dozens of programs that have a rolling cart that are actually dual stream programs. So cart just means cart, and single stream just means single stream, and you can have a cart without single stream, and you can have single stream without a cart. So those are two different things, and I really appreciate clarification, Louise.
Thank you.
So on the next slide, I'm going to explain a little bit about how this 100 tons versus 75 tons was calculated. There are the different stages that we go through. This is slide 10, and it shows stage 1 is collection, and it shows a collection truck. And then the materials go to the MRF, the Material Recovery Facility. And then there's post-MRF processing. And what usually happens, 99% of the time when we're having a conversation about contamination recycling, people are only looking at stage 2. When the materials leave the MRF, they say, 85% of the materials that leave the MRF leave as commodities, and therefore the contamination rate is 15%. What they don't talk about is the fact that within those commodities that leave the MRF, there's still a whole bunch of the wrong material mixed in. There's cross-contamination. And that cross-contamination is removed in stage 3 at the post-MRF processing, meaning examples of post-MRF processing are the paper mill, or the plastics reclaimer, or the aluminum smelter. All of those facilities around the world are cleaning additional contamination out of the loads that were delivered to them as supposedly clean loads. And they generally aren't, and there are very high levels of contamination with single stream recycling. In the study that we did, found that first stage contamination was only 8%, and second stage contamination was 17%, and the two of them together was 25%. So what we found was that second stage contamination was actually twice as much as first stage contamination.
Susan, would you let me interject one more time? And
Yes.
that is on number 2, the MRF. That's a materials recovery facility. And here in Fayetteville, our MRF is down on 15th Street. And because we use curb sort, all they're having to do down on 15th Street basically